Welcome to Inside the Care Home. This is a podcast for care home owners and senior leaders who are trying to run outstanding care services in a world that's getting more complex, more digital, and more demanding by the year. Each episode is an honest look at the decisions, trade-offs, and mistakes that sit behind the day-to-day reality of operating a care home, where data and digital systems shape outcomes, but it's leadership that determines whether they help or hinder. This isn't about tools or trends. It's about thinking clearly, leading well, and building care homes that are sustainable for the people who live in them and the people who run them. So let's get into it.
Hello again, I'm Richard Ayres from Care England. Now, workforce sits at the heart of everything in adult social care and is often the area where leadership feel the greatest pressure and responsibility. The final conversation in our series of 4 with DigiHive focuses on people. So across the 4 recordings, we've been exploring profit, quality and time. And today we're going to explore people, as it's interconnected with leadership pressures rather than an isolated issue. The intention of this series has been to provide a space for honest reflection on leadership in care, grounded in real-world experience. And I'm really proud again to be joined by Samir Patel. And Samir, for the very last time, before we start, would you like to introduce yourself for anyone who hasn't seen our previous sessions?
Thank you so much, Richard. I'm Samir Patel. I'm the founder of Care Home DigiHive and care home owner and provider and operator down on the South Coast. Thank you for having me again, Richard.
My absolute pleasure. Now, Samir, I want to start with one of the biggest pressures facing care today. It's workforce retention. Now, we know recruitment is hard. Competition is incredibly fierce out there and pay pressures are incredibly real. Many providers are losing really good people faster than they can replace them. And while funding and pay absolutely matter, there's something interesting we do see across the sector. Some care homes retain staff better than others, even in the same local markets. So from your experience of a provider and operator of multiple care homes, what does that tell us?
Thank you, Richard. And this particular pillar is actually one of the most powerful ones for me. And it's because in this little circle that we often talk about in care, people is at the top for me, the top of the circle. And if we as leaders make sure we are doing our best to look after the people in our services, the people that are in our teams, the people that are providing the care for those residents that we're looking after, they are the first step. So if the people are happy, hopefully it means that their happiness will resonate with the residents they're looking after. If the residents in our services are happy, it means their family members, those people that have trusted us to look after their loved ones, the stakeholders such as GPs, OTs, district nurses, visiting stakeholders, it means they're happy. Hopefully, if they're all happy, it means that our regulator is happy because they're getting all that wonderful feedback. And then, as I say in my service, that hopefully means that Samir is happy once all those people have ticked that box. But it all starts with our people. So whatever we can do to retain and keep hold of those most valuable team members is up there for me. And alongside that, I suppose it's worth acknowledging that the pay matters and funding does matter. But actually, I think retention really does vary up and down the country and across the country as well. So sometimes maybe it could be assumed that recruitment is the issue, but I think if we can do all we can to improve that retention, that's really, really important. And when we talk about retention and around leadership, retention is leadership and culture. It's not just HR. And I think quite often we could think it's an HR issue. So retention isn't just a recruitment problem, but actually it's a leadership and culture problem quite often, and making sure that we're really tight and aligned and that we're sharing those messages about the values that we hold close as a business and a service is really trickled down throughout the entire team for me is very, very important.
Yeah, keeping everyone happy is not easy, but we've got an employment rights bill coming very soon, a fair pay agreement coming in 2028, which we need to build up for. And that's all about improving rights for individuals working, our most precious asset, our care workers, and trying to get a level of pay that's conducive to, really impacting positive retention. But I think we've got an obligation as care leaders to create that critical kind of culture of nurturing people and looking after people and really taking care of our, as I said, our most important asset. because if we don't, the unions are going to step in to do that for us. So it's really important that we acknowledge that we need to look after our staff now and nurture them, because it's incredibly costly to replace staff. I think Skills for Care in 2017, they reported that to recruit someone, to retain them for a year, to go through the training, to bring them on board and what have you, cost £6,222 for a 12-month period. And that's in 2017. Will have significantly increased since then. So I think in the last year alone, the sector spent over £2 billion recruiting and retaining 350,000 people. So huge amount of cost. So when staffing kind of really feels stretched, leaders tend to go straight into recruitment mode, don't they? You know, what tends to get missed when kind of retention is then treated as more of like an HR-based task?
I think you're absolutely right. The immediate reaction is more adverts, more interviews, more urgency, and we just need more. We need more. And quite often, I think what can get missed are some of those all-important exit interviews. Actually taking the time to see what the challenges were that the person that is no longer going to be in your team, the challenges they face, what they feel we could have done better, and taking that feedback on, not defensively, but as an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to grow. It's almost free consultancy in a way, right? Of seeing what you need to do to improve your values and the how you're looking after your team. And I think quite often we can then think it was about the policy. We need new policy, or we need to change some paperwork, and that's going to fix our problem. But I don't think people ever really leave a care home or a care service or employment because of a policy gap. Quite often, I think it's because of how they feel day to day. And it's a phrase my mum often used to say to me, was that, you know, people won't remember necessarily what you do, but people will always remember how you make them feel. And I think that's a really important lesson that we as leaders need to think about when we are considering recruitment and retention, and how we hold ourselves, as well as the rest of the team, accountable to those core values. And I think things that help people have that sense of goodness, that sense of good feeling and positivity, is when they feel supported, when they feel heard and they feel seen. And that will allow them the time and space then hopefully to care properly. So as I say, I don't think for me people necessarily leave care because of a policy document or a gap along in those terms, but maybe it's down to the environment or the rest of the values that are going on within the home, maybe not being aligned.
I'm going to remember your mum's wise words there. It's not what you don't remember what they say, it's how they make you feel. You're absolutely right. I can think back to leaders I've had over many, many years and how they made me feel, whether that was positive or negative. And some of them are truly inspiring. You know, I can't remember the words of some of my leaders when I was a lot younger, but they inspired me on the career I've got today, and I'm very grateful to them for it. Exit interviews, you are again spot on. There's a great organisation that we do some work with, Cohesion, and they do thousands of exit interviews, and it releases gold. You've got to be careful how you do this, because you don't always want to be doing it personally yourself. Sometimes you need to get other people to do it, but it can really unlock what's happened, what went wrong, or what went right. It might be changed in people's personal situations, but it gives you those nuggets that you can potentially build on and change. But we do know there is a statistic across all industries that 50% of people tend to leave their roles because of their leader. So that culture, I think, is a really, really important point that you mentioned. And it does get talked about a lot, but it can feel a bit vague. You know, what is culture? How do you describe culture? Because it's different everywhere. Could you maybe just give us an example of what culture actually looks like in practice from your experiences?
I could probably think of an example in one of my own services that happened in the last couple of years that actually still brings a lump to my throat today, if I'm honest with you. We'd had a member of the team who had suffered an injury and was returning after a really long absence from work, actually, been away for a good number of months. And upon her return, one of the offices that she worked in had been completely fitted out and decorated, banners, balloons, cakes, snacks. Residents had written cards. There were gifts from residents, and I even remember actually a member of the team had written a song for this particular person as well, and all the team performed a song upon her return. And I think that's, for me, is culture. And that is it wasn't planned. It wasn't something that came from us in the head office or leadership team. It wasn't instructed, it wasn't logged. It's just something that came from the heart. And it's just a beautiful story that I think, as I say, brings a lot of emotion to me when I think back about it. But in terms of how you get to that, I suppose, I don't think it's easy. And I think, again, it's one of these things that you probably see peaks and troughs about when maybe culture is good and things are well aligned. And we as leaders, I suppose, we don't want to see those big dips and those big spikes in that. We want to see that consistency. So one of the ways that we've gone about it in our services over the years is that, probably going back 5 or 6 years now, we actually went out to the team and said we wanted to undertake a project. It was going to take 6 months to do, which it did. Actually took a little bit longer. And we wanted to co-produce what those values look like and how the services wanted to be held account to, not only by themselves, but by families, and how they wanted me to be held accountable as well as a leader of the organisation. And we went away and we wrote up these 10 values, and that has now become our North Star. And any decision that we make, whether that is around, whether we employ somebody, we don't employ somebody, if we are looking to have a conversation about a challenging issue, we relate it back to those core values that we wrote 5 or 6 years ago. And don't get me wrong, we've reviewed them over that time and we've had catch-up conversations and seen if we need to realign them. But actually, that's helped us as a team develop a set of values that we're all signed up to. And that has stood us in really good stead for the last few years. But I think, as I say, going back to that story about the member of staff that came back after long-term sickness, I don't think culture is really about showing up when everybody's in the room. It's about those things that happen maybe when nobody's looking and nobody's in the room. And we're not trying to impress anybody. It's just that genuine loving care that I think we can exude. And we've got an abundance of people that work in our sector, I think, that have those qualities. So I think our job as leaders is to make sure that we are keeping that at the top and to the brim, and that we're making sure their cups are filled to be able to share that love and care that we want them to.
That's brilliant. Co-produced values, they can make a real big difference. And all they get lived on a day-to-day basis, and that's the leader's role, isn't it? Yeah, to really drive. I can remember, I'm probably going back 25 years now, when I worked at Virgin, we had dotted all around the building the values. There was 5 core values, and they were dotted around. I could still remember them today. And it's amazing how, when you've got them visible and people live them and people see them and understand them, and every time you do something, you ask, am I meeting one of the values with this? And if not, I need to question, why am I doing it? It's very, very important. And your person returning back to the business, I mean, that's a really powerful example. Very much like a kind of family community feel, which is what you want a residential service specifically to feel like, isn't it? And that community culture, very organic. But consistency, I think that was the theme that I picked up there, is ironing out those peaks and troughs, because you don't want the big gaps in between. So with all of that, what does that really tell us about why people actually stay in care, though?
I think for me, it really exemplifies the importance of relationships, and that we are a people business. And one of the things we often see in our DigiHive community is where people are looking to introduce technology into their service, is that they think that's going to take over. And that's why this people pillar is so important as part of these 4 that we have within the DigiHive, because we are a people business, we're a caring business. So having those relationships, those human interactions are so vital. And I think sometimes we often forget that kindness is just the normal. It should be the normal. So we want to make sure that we're being kind to one another, and again, treating people as we'd like to be treated, whether that's our co-workers or the people that we're looking after. And I think the sense of community, the sense of togetherness and value, and you mentioned the word family there, is really, really vital to having a well engaged and a truly powerful workforce that is going to be hopefully retained for many years, and keep delivering that outstanding care you want them to. Because I think the reality is, Richard, is that care work is hard. It's not an easy job to get into. It's a vocation. And I think the pressure is real, right? If we look at our services, and I look at my services over the years, the level of needs of people now coming into our care services is way higher than it was 4 or 5 years ago. If I go back 20 years till we had our first care home, the level of needs that people that are coming in now is so much more. And our skilled workforce needs to be appreciated and needs to be valued. So having those relationships and having that understanding, having that, as I say, time to be able to spend with our team to help them develop, to help understand their challenges, for me as a leader, is vitally important. And then we can obviously hopefully shape how the service is developing and growing around that all important asset, as you said, the people. But I think it's difficult to force. You can't kind of force a culture on people. But I think hopefully as leaders, we can maybe shape the behaviours every day and make sure, as you say, we are holding ourselves and everybody accountable to those joined up values.
Kindness, to each other, treating people how we want to be treated, family, community, understanding people's needs. I mean, they're all great, and that's what we should all be striving to. But it can feel a bit intangible in parts. So realistically, what can leaders do differently day to day to kind of bring those values to life? What are those sorts of things?
I think we quite often get caught up, can't we? In kind of like, as you say, maybe some of the big corporate ways of how they do things. Yeah. In essence, as you say, we're smaller communities, probably with slightly smaller teams. And I think the important thing to say is that a lot of this stuff I don't think requires big budgets. I think it just requires a bit of attention and a bit of intention to make sure it's one of those things that you are focusing on. Saying thank you to somebody doesn't require a big budget. It just requires, as you say, that bit of kindness. One thing that I think is vitally important as well as leaders is actually being present and being seen on the floor of our care services as well. I think that is a simple behaviour that can have huge impacts on team members. Another important area, I think, in terms of the behaviours is creating space. So it links back to one of the other pillars that we spoke about earlier, creating that time and space for team members to be able to connect and form some relationships as well is vitally important. And as I say, these aren't big costly things that are going to cost the earth, but I think we need to make sure that we are being intentional about trying to bring those relationships together and that we're being consistent in those. Again, a lot of this we're talking about with the people pillar. We don't want peaks and troughs. We don't want these big ups and downs. Just trying to be level and consistent is really, really important. So I think for me, retention is built in small little steps, but every day. And as leaders, I think it's important that we hold ourselves account to that.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be big budgets. So I've heard that, and that's, I think, kind of important in some respects, because people will often think, it's going to cost me a lot of money to try and do this. And you can't really change a culture. You've got to evolve a culture. It's got to feel sort of inherent, hasn't it? And it has to be intention-based. I like the idea of being seen on the floor, because I think sometimes leadership can be seen as people in ivory towers. So it's really important that people are out there in the work doing what needs to be done. That's really good advice. And consistency, again, ironing out those peaks and troughs that you talked about. So if a leader is listening or watching this today and feeling kind of stretched and a bit sort of overwhelmed with things, what's maybe just one simple thing they can do this week that's going to make a difference for them?
Pick one member of the team, sit down, have a cup of tea with them, slice a cake, maybe a biscuit, and take the time to actually listen to them. Maybe thank them for some of the hard work they've been doing, and be really specific about, actually, this is what we've noticed and this is the impact that you had on a particular resident, and be meaningful about it. Genuinely be present, turn the phone off, pop it on silent for 10-15 minutes and just be there with them. And I think that can really help reframe that relationship that you have with the person, and it won't feel forced, and it won't feel like it's a set HR program that we're trying to implement throughout the care service. It's not a scheme, but just a genuine, heartfelt, meaningful interaction, I think, can go an awful long way. Just, as I say, start small and give it a go with one person, because, as I said, these small actions really can help shape that culture far, far bigger than some big statement or a big brand new sign up that is listing all these values or plastering up a whole new set of values on the wall or in the staff room. Small actions. People remember how you feel, how you made them feel.
Yeah, I can feel the waistline bulging with the tea and the cakes. You've got big workforces in these cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
So being in the moment, I think when you're there, turning the phone, that's a really good advice. So the phone's not going every 5 minutes, or give the phone to somebody else while you're doing that time and protect it. I think that's really important. I was given an example of exactly that yesterday, and A lady I was at an event with, she is lucky enough to have her own horse, and she had a photograph up about her riding, and one of her kind of care staff came through, and she loves horses as well, and she just said, we're making a cup of tea, and they started having a conversation about horses, and she was having a conversation with the boss about a horse, and she could see the lady's face light up, and she just thought, that's a moment, take that mental sort of camera picture. She'd really made someone's day by having that conversation, and now they've got something to bond over. So when they walk past each other in corridor, they can have that smile and they can talk about something. So those sort of things make a big difference. And I know workforce pressure in care isn't going to go away anytime soon, and how leaders respond to it does really, really matter. And I think through this partnership with Care Home DigiHive, we're really focusing on supporting leaders to build those stronger teams and healthier cultures, not through policies and quick fixes, but through better leadership, better habits and better shared learning, because it's all about sharing the learning. We learn from each other. It's the examples that we see and hear from others is how we learn better. And I know inside the DigiHive Academy, members can access practical guidance, mentoring style conversations and community of care leaders who are learning from others who are maybe struggling on their own, can really benefit from those resources. So if keeping good people is one of your biggest challenges, then this is a very practical and supportive next step for you. I want to thank everyone for listening to our full series of 4 recordings. We've covered 4 fantastic topics, and we really hope that you will review all 4 of them, and we look forward to seeing you and listening to you and your feedback on what you think of the series. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you again, Samir.
Thanks, Richard.
Running a care home rarely gives you time to step back and think. Most days you're just moving from one decision and on to the next. But this podcast exists to pause that momentum for a moment, to look at what's actually happening inside care homes, the pressures, the trade-offs, the things that don't always make it into the reports or the meetings. So if something in this episode felt familiar, I hope that's intentional. These conversations aren't about having perfect answers. They're about seeing the reality more clearly, so the next decision is better than the one before. I'll continue this inside look next time. This is Inside the Care Home, an honest look at the decisions and realities behind running care homes today. Thanks for listening.